Sure,
story. All
man.
right. We have over under win totals, Ted. That when these things start coming out, and I know it's only May 10th, like I get it, but it starts to make the season feel near
It
to
does.
me. Like you're like, okay, we've got numbers, we've got odds, but DraftKings release their over under win totals for every Big 12 team. Let's just go through them real quick alphabetically. They've got Baylor at 7.5, BYU at 6, Cincinnati at 4.5, Houston at 4.5, Iowa State at 5.5, Kansas at 6.5, Kansas State at 8.5, Oklahoma at 9.5, Oklahoma State at 6.5, TCU at 7.5, Texas at 9.5, Texas Tech at 7.5, UCF at 6.5, and West Virginia at 4.5. Let's start by focusing on the Sooners. Ted, OU with an over under win total of 9.5. What do you think?
I think it's it's a pretty safe over bet for Oklahoma. And it really doesn't have anything to do with necessarily how good of a football team we are. I think we can become a really good football team. We got a lot of work to do. I think that can happen. But for me, it's the schedule. It's the schedule. I and maybe I'm blind to it. Maybe there's bias. You could call it whatever you want, but I I fully believe that we have the easiest schedule that I've ever seen Oklahoma have in the 20 plus years I've been involved with the program. And I know that there's going to be a couple of teams on the schedule that, like right now, I don't know. You've got UCF with a 6.5 win total. You've got some of these other schools with low win totals. Like someone's going to come from the pack and be a really good team. It just happens in this conference every year. It happened with TCU last year. So there's going to be some teams that I definitely undervalue, but still, given that, I mean, there's a really good chance that we play one top 25 team the entire year, and that's Texas. And there's a chance Texas isn't even in the top 25 by the time we play them with what their schedule looks like before they play us. So for me, I would take the over. Has more to do with the schedule than it does what I necessarily think of the football team.
So you're very interesting when it comes to this thing because you are a fan of I don't want to call them low expectations, but let's call them more reasonable
Mm-hmm.
expectations, right? You'd rather them, have a win total of 8 as the over under as opposed to 9.5. So does this make you feel any better or worse about the season right now? Clearly didn't live up to the expectations last season, right?
Mm-hmm.
But can Oklahoma play the nobody believes in us card when your over under win total is 9.5 when you're tied for the highest win total in the entire conference? Like I guess Venables can try, right? Hey, Kirby Smart played it last year, so if they can do
Right.
it, certainly Venables can do it.
Well, I think they definitely can. Um, you know, it's a high win total, but I don't think it has anything to do. A lot of times, Vegas is trying to find this range to where they can get action. If they have Oklahoma with the schedule that they have with the 8 game win total, they're going to be flooded with money on Oklahoma to win more than 8 games, and the program is basically a 10 win team, since post World War II. So Vegas doesn't want to find themselves in that situation. So like I think this is a pretty good number, but yeah, I think they can. I mean, it's going to be difficult with the win total numbers, but if they're even a top 25 team preseason, they're going to be fringe. Like they're going to be 20 and above. I think 22 seems to be the throw you a bone number is what it usually is. 21, 22. which I think is the best Oklahoma could probably ask for in that regard. So yeah, I think they can come into the season with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, which they should. They have a ton of reasons to do so, but yeah, I think they could use that as some motivation.
Yeah, when you look at, and I completely agree with you, right? The schedule, let's go with it, is favorable, right? Remember, you don't have Georgia in that non-conference game anymore. They get replaced by SMU, and SMU, that is not some gimme game, right? Let's make that very clear. Now, it's in Norman. You feel really good about it being week 2, right? You're going to have a tune-up game in week 1 to get ready for that game, right? The trip to Tulsa, that's going to be a home game. So when you think about the toughest games that OU's got on the schedule, I do think going to Cincinnati is going to be interesting, right? You've never been there. It's a foreign environment. It's just going to be, it's going to be a new field. There is some uncertainty about what that team's going to look like now that Scott Satterfield is there running things in Cincinnati. Clearly, Texas in the Cotton Bowl is going to be the marquee game of the year, just like it always is. And then you've got 3, what I will call, maybe they're not sneaky, but I think at Kansas is very interesting. Mm-hmm. Now that they've got things in order there in Lawrence. At Oklahoma State, right? Bedlam. That's always interesting. And then, of course, the November trip to BYU. Provo in November. Everybody tells me that that's an electric atmosphere, right? Mm-hmm. And that Oklahoma's going to have to handle that and weather that storm there and deal with the cold and all that. But I do think when you look at the schedule, right, if your toughest games involve, Cincinnati, Kansas, and BYU, get a pretty favorable schedule, man.
I know. That's the thing. And we're at Kansas, and that's going to be a different Kansas situation than it's been the last 15 years, right?
Yeah, I do want to add TCU in the finale, obviously in Norman. TCU, right. I think they're going to be, I know they lost a lot, but they're going to be a talented football team again.
Yeah. But I think that Oklahoma historically has played better in bigger environments. I don't worry about the bigger environments. I worry about the big favorite, sleepy environment. That's what I worry about. And I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of situations like that. First time going to Cincinnati, I think that energizes the team. A little bit of unknown, right? As a coaching staff, when there's unknown, you could scare your players, right? Scare them into, having their nose in their playbook the entire week and making sure that they're super locked in. It's same thing with BYU. So I don't know. Again, the schedule, the favorability, as you put it, is about all we could ask for, especially coming off the year we had last year. So I would take the over on the 9.5. I think it's a really fair number for Oklahoma, considering historically what the program does, take into account last year. But still, I mean, I think that there's plenty of opportunity for this Oklahoma team to turn into a legitimate, what we would consider a double-digit win team, regardless of what their schedule looks like. Some things have to happen. We've got a long way to go, but I think they could turn into a really good football team.
Yeah. When you look at the schedule, and then you also have to take this in account. And this is something I've gathered over the years from the nerds, right? Like our buddy Bill Conley over at ESPN, right? Who's been on the podcast multiple times. There is, sometimes you look at a season where you underperformed and you see how many close losses there are. And then just statistically speaking, that trend tends to flip, right? Or at least I certainly hope it will. So the hope is you don't lose all those close games again. You win those close games, and all of a sudden you're looking at a double-digit win season. So I don't know if you want to call it luck, right? That's it. I think it's hard to put a metric to luck, but I do think all the close losses they had in 2022, like statistically speaking, that should not repeat itself, right?
Yep.
So instead of being a 6-win team, you're a 9 or 10-win team, right? That's one of the things when I look at this number, I'm like, okay, they lost a bunch of close games, got a bunch of guys back, year of experience in those new systems offensively and defensively. Hopefully that luck, or for lack of a better term, flips and you win those close games.
Yeah. Nope. I totally agree with that. Good teams tend to get luckier, right? It's just good players find themselves around the ball. Good things happen to good players. Good things happen to good teams. But you're right. Things typically are going to even out a little bit. We've been the beneficiary of some calls and some plays in past years. And honestly, you just look at what was it, the 21 season? What did we end up winning in that? We won 10 games that year. The difference between 21 and 22 is really not that much. It's basically the same team. I know it's not the same players. I'm just talking about like really the skill level and how good they that I think they actually were. The 21 team found a way to come up with some really close victories, some close wins, some fortunate plays, and the next year's team didn't come up with any of those plays. And you have this dramatic difference in what the overall record is, but I don't think there's that dramatic of a difference between the two actual teams. So, I mean, I think that's a pretty good case in point what you're talking about. I think there's a good chance that, those things maybe even out and there's a line in between the two. But I also think that there's a chance that we have a much better team than both the 21 and 22 seasons.
Gotcha. Yeah, makes sense. Now I will point out Caleb Williams was on the 2021 team. Just saying.
It's true. Well, it's definitely
but a young, true freshman Caleb Williams. So I hear what you're saying. The situations that 21 team was in where they pulled out some victories, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very similar situations to the 2022 team that weren't able to pull out those victories.
Right. Yep. That's right.
All right. Before we pick a couple of our other favorite bets, looking at those win totals, let's get to call your shot. And we asked y'all what y'all thought about OU's over under win total being 9.5. This first one comes from Boom City 32, who says, just right, easily 3-0 in non-conference play, which means OU has to lose 3 games of Cincinnati, Iowa State, Texas, UCF, Kansas, Oklahoma State, West Virginia, BYU, and TCU for the under 9.5 wins. To me, with this schedule, OU should not be losing 3 or more games. Boom City 32, and we tend to agree with him. When you look at the schedule, it'd be disappointing if it's a 3-loss team.
As you look at it right now, it's hard to, and again, like I've said, things change. Someone is going to turn into a really, really good football team that you maybe just don't see it right now. It's hard to find 3 losses on that schedule if you look at it right now. Other year, like if Kansas State was on there, okay, I could start to point out some losses a little bit differently, but yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and remember, don't play K-State, don't play Texas Tech, don't play Baylor in the regular season, at least. Maybe you end up getting one of those teams in the Big 12 championship game if you get there. But yeah, those right teams you lost to a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that's part of it as well. So you look at the schedule. That's what we all keep coming back to. Like you look at that schedule and it's just, I don't want to use the word easy, but now last year's schedule I thought lined up pretty well too, though. And what happened. So you never know, and there's always injuries and all that stuff, but we're just talking on paper.
Yep.
thinking everyone's going to be healthy for the most part and available. It looks good. This other one is interesting. Comes from Tyler G. Ford 11, who says, I would take the under. 9 wins would be a successful year and would show that progress is being made. That's where I have them. Would 9 wins be a successful year? 9-3 in the regular season with this schedule?
With this schedule and assuming health and all of those things, no, in my opinion, absolutely not. Not even, I mean, no, it's not. I know we've reset a little bit, but like, no, it's just, I don't think so. I mean, some people may, and I'm glad that some of the fan base have tempered expectations, and that's fine. Think that's good, but I don't. I think with this schedule should be a 10-win team at least, and we should be in the Big 12 championship.
I think it's important to remind people. I know last year went poorly. Still Oklahoma, man. The expectations do not change no matter how poorly it went the year before. Right? And I know I feel that way. And I know the vast majority of the fan base feels that way. The expectation is to win the Big 12 and go to the college football playoff.
Yep.
That's it, man. I mean, and it never changes. So to say a 9-win season would be successful. Yeah, obviously winning 3 more games than a year ago, right, that would be a good thing. But with how the schedule lays out, I would be disappointed in that.
Yeah.
Just because that's just how I feel, man. It's just where I'm at with it.
If you look, you can't look at the schedule and outside of Texas, because that's the one game that historically it really doesn't matter how good one team or the other is entering the contest. Sometimes you have 2 top 5 teams and it's an absolute blowout. Sometimes you have one team that's top 5 and the other is, has 3 losses rolling in, and you've got a dogfight. And sometimes the bad team up to that point wins it. So that's the one that you just throw out. Like you can envision losing that game. Every other game on that schedule, think about taking a loss in that game and how you would feel looking at it right now. You would not say, oh yeah, UCF, at home, it's their first time in the Big 12. They've run Molzon, they've run a good offense. No, there's nobody that can look at really any of these games and say, yeah, as Oklahoma, it's understandable to lose to insert team here. At least for me right now, I don't see it.
I think 99% of people, including me, feel the same way that you do.
All right.